Travis Hall had always seemed like an ordinary man, but on a quiet Thursday morning in Brookdale, his name would become synonymous with shock, disbelief, and a story no one could ignore. Travis Hall walked through the sliding glass doors of the Brookdale Walmart just before 10 in the morning. The automatic doors whooshed open, letting in a gust of cool air as he stepped inside. From the outside, he looked like anyone else. Plain jeans, gray hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days. The store was alive with the usual sounds of beeping scanners, squeaky carts, and chatter from families shopping for groceries and supplies. No one paid him any attention, and that was exactly how he wanted it. He kept his eyes low, avoiding contact with the greeter who smiled out of habit. Inside, Travis moved with purpose, though it was hard to tell what he was looking for. He pushed an empty cart down the aisles, glancing at the signs overhead as if deciding what to buy. He stopped briefly at the electronics section, pretending to look at phone chargers, then drifted toward health and beauty. His movements were slow, deliberate, and oddly focused. To anyone watching from a distance, he might have seemed anxious, maybe even lost. But there was something else behind his stillness, a strange intensity that did not fit the setting. As the minutes passed, his behavior began to change. He looked around more often, his breathing shallow and uneven. His fingers trembled as he touched items on the shelves, moving bottles aside, rearranging things in quiet, meticulous patterns. A mother with a toddler turned into the aisle but quickly backed out after catching a glimpse of him. She didn't say a word, only hurried off with a disturbed look. Nearby cameras recorded everything without interruption, capturing every twitch and subtle movement. At 10:08 a.m., one of the store's employees noticed Travis acting suspiciously. The young woman in a blue vest whispered to her coworker, unsure of what she was seeing. She turned her head away but couldn't shake the unease crawling down her spine. The coworker walked toward the security office, deciding it was better to let the guards handle whatever was happening. Meanwhile, Travis's strange focus deepened. His lips moved slightly, though no sound came out. He stood frozen for a moment, staring at the shelves in front of him as if something invisible was speaking back. When he finally moved, it was with an unnerving calmness that made even the security footage hard to watch later. He seemed completely disconnected from the world around him. Within minutes, customers started avoiding the aisle altogether. A manager discreetly called for a code blue over the intercom, a quiet signal that something inappropriate or dangerous was happening. 2 guards made their way toward the scene, uncertain of what they were about to confront. By the time they reached aisle 9, several witnesses had already seen enough to turn away in disgust. The moment the guards arrived, they froze. Travis stood motionless, eyes blank, unaware of anyone's presence. One of the guards immediately radioed for police assistance, while the other tried to block the view from nearby shoppers. The store's routine morning calm had vanished, replaced with confusion and unease. In less than half an hour, what began as an ordinary shopping trip had spiraled into an incident that would soon make headlines across the state. The security guards surrounded Travis cautiously, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The scene was unsettling, silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights and the distant chatter of customers who had no idea what was happening a few aisles away. Travis didn't move or resist when the guards approached him. His face was empty, drained of emotion, as if his mind had gone somewhere far beyond the walls of the store. When one of the guards gently touched his shoulder, he blinked slowly, as though waking from a trance. His eyes wandered around the aisle, unfocused, before settling on the floor. The police arrived within minutes. Officer Reynolds, a veteran of the Brookdale Police Department, walked in with calm authority. He had handled all kinds of calls before: theft, domestic disputes, even a few violent arrests. But this one was different. As he was led to the scene by the store manager, he could already sense the unease in the air. The security office had played him the footage, and it was enough to make his stomach turn. Still, he kept his composure. He ordered everyone to clear the area and had Travis escorted quietly toward the exit. Shoppers began recording on their phones, their curiosity outweighing their decency. Some whispered, others laughed nervously, not understanding the gravity of what they were witnessing. Travis walked calmly between the officers, head lowered, saying nothing. He didn't struggle, didn't plead. His expression remained flat, as though none of it mattered. The police car's lights flashed against the glass doors as they let him out, and for a moment, the whole store fell into a tense hush. The whispers would grow louder once he was gone, and by nightfall, the story would be everywhere. At the station, Officer Reynolds and his team began their questioning. Travis sat across from them, hands resting on the metal table, his posture still and unnatural. He didn't appear intoxicated or panicked. When asked about what happened, he gave short, distant answers that left investigators uneasy. He spoke about signals and frequencies, his voice low and steady. He said the lights in the store had been calling to him, that he could feel them vibrating inside his head. Reynolds exchanged a glance with the detective beside him, both realizing this wasn't just a case of indecent exposure. Something far more disturbed was going on in this man's mind. The incident report was filed quickly, but the internet worked faster. Within hours, the video of Travis being led out in handcuffs flooded social media. Comments poured in, filled with mockery, disgust, and morbid curiosity. The phrase Walmart man became a trending tag, spreading far beyond Brookdale. But behind the viral attention, investigators were already digging deeper. They discovered Travis wasn't a stranger to strange behavior. His name appeared in past police logs from nearby towns, linked to trespassing cases and unexplained late-night break-ins. Each time, the circumstances were odd. No theft, no vandalism, just him wandering into closed stores for reasons he never explained. Now it was clear that this wasn't a random act. It was part of something that had been building inside him for years, something that no one had seen coming until it finally erupted in the most public way possible. When the officers began tracing Travis Hall's past, they expected to find a few minor run-ins with the law, maybe an unpaid fine or disorderly conduct charge. What they uncovered instead was a series of incidents that stretched across several towns and nearly a decade. Each event followed the same pattern: late-night appearances in department stores, unexplained behavior, and vague reports that never led to formal charges. In one town, he had been found sitting in a darkened grocery aisle long after closing, staring at a flickering ceiling light. In another, security cameras caught him walking in circles inside a convenience store storage room, muttering to himself until the employees discovered him. None of those cases had resulted in arrest because he never caused damage or stole anything. He would simply vanish before the police arrived, leaving behind only confusion and questions. As investigators pieced together his background, they found that Travis had no stable job and lived in small apartments that he rarely kept for long. Neighbors described him as polite, but withdrawn, a man who spoke little and left home mostly at night. A landlord from one of his previous addresses recalled that Travis would spend hours standing by his window, gazing at the streetlights. Another remembered how he often took apart radios and smoke alarms, scattering their electronic pieces across his kitchen table. He had no close friends or family nearby. His parents had passed away when he was a teenager, and he had drifted through life ever since, bouncing between temporary work and cheap housing. Detectives received a warrant to search his current apartment. Inside, they found a space that felt more like a laboratory than a living area. Every wall was covered in sheets of notebook paper taped together in sprawling patterns. Drawings of store layouts, grids, and electric wiring diagrams were scrawled in pen and marker. Lines connected various store logos, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, with dates and numbers written beside them. The notes described power fields and vibration channels, written in a shaky hand that grew more frantic the further they read. A single phrase appeared repeatedly across the papers. The signal speaks through light. Among the clutter were old receipts from stores he had visited, meticulously saved and dated. Investigators found a journal that detailed his thoughts leading up to the Walmart incident. In it, he wrote that the store's fluorescent lights created an energy frequency that aligned with human rhythm. He believed he had discovered a pattern that allowed the mind to connect directly to invisible forces. To him, his public act wasn't an expression of desire, but an attempt to complete the link. The more they read, the clearer it became that Travis didn't view his actions as wrong or shameful. He saw them as a kind of ritual experiment. The findings unsettled even the most experienced officers. It wasn't just perversion or mental illness. It was obsession twisted into belief. They turned the evidence over to the psychiatric unit for further evaluation, but one detail continued to trouble them. At the bottom of one wall chart, drawn in thick red ink, was a list of store names with specific times beside them. The next date was only 6 days away, marked with a small note that read, Test 2. The officers realized with a chill that if they hadn't caught him when they did, Travis might have already been planning his next experiment, one that could have taken place in another crowded store among unsuspecting people who had no idea they were standing in the center of someone's delusion. The psychiatric evaluation of Travis Hall began only days after his arrest, and from the very first session, doctors knew they were dealing with something far from ordinary. He showed no remorse, no fear, and no understanding of why people were horrified by what he had done. He answered every question calmly, his tone disturbingly level, as if describing someone else's life instead of his own. The doctors noted a complete lack of emotional connection, yet an intense fixation on light and energy. He claimed that stores like Walmart were designed to channel frequencies, that their layout and lighting created invisible waves that interacted with the human mind. His words were organized but detached from reality, detailed yet delusional. Every sentence seemed to spiral deeper into an invented world that only he could see. The psychiatrists explored his past, looking for trauma or mental illness in his family history. They learned that his mother had once been treated for auditory hallucinations, and his father had disappeared when Travis was a child. He had spent most of his life in and out of low-income housing and had never maintained stable employment. One of the doctors described him as a man whose mind fractured slowly over years of isolation. But others disagreed, arguing that his behaviors were too deliberate, too methodical. They believed his delusions had evolved into a purpose, one that blended madness with control. During sessions, Travis often requested dimmed lights, claiming that the brightness made the signal stronger. He refused medication, insisting that the doctors were trying to block his connection. When they pressed him about the incident, he explained that the act had not been driven by lust, but by spiritual necessity. He believed that physical energy could amplify frequencies from the fluorescent lights, allowing him to reach a state of clarity. To him, his behavior wasn't an offense, it was an experiment. The words chilled the examiners because he spoke with complete certainty, as though scientific law was on his side. Investigators revisited the items found in his apartment, trying to understand whether his writings were the result of mental illness or something more dangerous. They noticed that the stores he listed in his notes weren't random. Each one shared the same architectural lighting system. Every diagram, every symbol seemed to trace back to the design of those lights. Even more unsettling was a small notebook filled with precise measurements of brightness and pulse frequency taken from stores across 3 counties. He had been collecting data for years. The psychiatrists finally classified his condition as a severe delusional disorder with obsessive-compulsive traits. But even as they made their diagnosis, none could ignore the methodical intelligence behind his madness. He was not chaotic. He was structured, patient, and strangely logical within his own distorted framework. One night, during observation, a nurse reported that Travis sat upright for hours, staring at a small flickering bulb in the ceiling, whispering quietly as if in prayer. When she passed by, she saw him sketching something on his bedsheet, the floor plan of another Walmart. No one could explain how he knew its layout so precisely, or why he had drawn an X over the section labeled Lighting Maintenance. It left the staff uneasy, realizing that even confined behind locked doors, Travis's obsession had not ended. It had only found a new place to grow. Travis Hall's case moved slowly through the legal system, complicated by his mental health diagnosis. Prosecutors faced the difficult question of whether he should be tried as a criminal or treated as a patient in need of psychiatric care. The public demanded justice, fueled by viral videos and social media outrage, but the court had to weigh his condition carefully. A judge ultimately ruled that Travis would be held in a secure psychiatric facility while awaiting trial, where specialists could monitor him closely and evaluate the risk of him repeating such acts. Inside the facility, Travis adjusted quickly to the strict routines, though he did not conform willingly. He spent hours in his room, carefully mapping walls, lights, and vents. Staff noticed that his focus on lighting never wavered. He would sit near windows or under flickering fluorescent bulbs, measuring their intensity and recording numbers in small notebooks he had smuggled in. The doctors tried to intervene, explaining the dangers of his obsession, but he always claimed he was following instructions from the signal and could not stop. Even though he was under constant supervision, he managed to create a detailed chart of the building, marking points that he believed emitted the strongest frequencies. Months passed, and the town of Brookdale gradually moved on. Walmart employees returned to their routines, though whispers of the incident lingered, and the story became a local cautionary tale. Online, clips of the event continued to circulate, sparking debates about mental health, legality, and public safety. Yet the most unsettling part of the case was what happened inside the psychiatric facility. One evening, a nurse on duty noticed Travis standing silently by a corner of the common room, staring at the ceiling. The lights flickered faintly, and he began muttering numbers and patterns. Curious, the nurse checked the area he was observing and discovered that one of the fluorescent panels was malfunctioning, pulsing in a rhythm almost identical to what he had noted in his apartment diagrams. The alignment was uncanny. Staff realized that Travis had somehow detected the anomaly without ever leaving his room or being involved in maintenance. It suggested a level of awareness that went beyond ordinary observation, leaving everyone unsettled. Travis continued to demonstrate behavior that was both methodical and eerie. His notebooks grew thicker, filled with diagrams of rooms, lights, and frequencies that he claimed controlled human instinct. He spoke less to staff, preferring to write, and the patterns became more intricate over time. The psychiatrists documented every action, fearing that the next step could involve another public act if left unchecked. The case ultimately became a study in obsession, mental illness, and the thin line between belief and delusion. Travis Hall's behavior raised questions that lingered long after the incident, about human perception, the influence of environment on the mind, and the ways in which mental disorders can manifest in the most unexpected places. Even confined and monitored, Travis remained a reminder that some obsessions are impossible to fully control, and that sometimes the most disturbing actions are rooted not in malice, but in a mind lost to its own twisted logic. Though Brookdale returned to its quiet routines, the memory of that day endured, a story repeated in hushed tones by shoppers, employees, and viewers who had seen the viral footage. It became a warning that reality can fracture in ordinary places, and that sometimes the most shocking acts emerge from minds that are far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone might assume.